Om Bhurabhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonah Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste मेरे प्यारे दोस्तों, my dear friends. This is the second video on the life story and teachings of Annamalai Swami, a direct disciple or devotee of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi. So I start the second video when Annamalai Swami says, when I asked Bhagwan if I should continue with them, he replied, you need not do any of these pujas anymore. If you practice self-enquiry, that alone will be enough. My duties as an attendant were fairly simple, and I soon learned what to do. When devotees brought offerings, I had to return some of them as prasad. I also had to ensure that the men sat on one side of the hall and the women on the other. When Bhagwan went out, one attendant would go with him, while the other stayed behind to clean the hall. We had to keep the clothes that were on his sofa clean. We had to wash his clothes in the early morning. We have to hear water from his bath and if he for his bath, and if he went for any walks during the day, one of us would always accompany him. Bhagwan's clothes consisting of kaupins and dhotis. For most of the time he only ever wore a kaupina, a strip of cloth which covers the genitals and the center of the buttocks. It was held in place by another strip of cloth which was tied around his waist. Occasionally, when it was cold, he would wrap a dhoti around himself. Dhotis are strips of cloth which are usually worn like skirts. Bhagwan preferred to tie his in such a way that it extended from his armpits to his thighs. When he arrived in Tiruvannamalai in 1896, Bhagwan threw away all his personal possessions, including his clothes. He never wore normal clothes again. Bhagwan would usually go for a short walk about 3 times a day. Sometimes he would go to Palakotu, an area adjacent to his Ramanashramam where some of his devotees lived, and sometimes he would walk on the lower slopes of Arunachala. He had stopped going for Giri Pradakshina in 1926, but he still occasionally went for a long walk. Walking around a person or an object in a clockwise direction as an act of veneration or worship is called pradakshina. Giri means hill or mountain. In this context, Giri Pradakshina means walking around the mountain of Arunachala. There is an 8-mile road around the base of the mountain. Thousands of devotees regularly use this route to perform Giri Pradakshina. I remember going with him twice to the Samudram Lake, which is about a mile to the southwest of the ashram. We went once when it overflowed and once when the nearby pumping station was opened. I also once accompanied him to the forest near Cut to Shiva ashram about 2 miles from the ashram. On that occasion, Ganpati Muni came with us because Bhagwan wanted to show him a special tree which grew there. For that particular trip, we slipped out of the ashram while everyone was having his after lunch sleep. If we had been spotted, everyone in the ashram would have tried to come with us. Bhagwan always enjoyed his walk. He used to say that if he did not walk on the hill at least once a day, his legs would get stiff and painful. Bhagwan only slept about 4 to 5 hours every day. This meant long working hours for the attendants because one of us had to be on duty all the time he was awake. He never slept after lunch, whereas most of his devotees did. Bhagwan would often utilize this quiet time of the day to feed all the ashrams animals or to tour the ashram in order to inspect any building works that were in progress. Bhagwan would generally go to sleep at about 10 p.m., but he would usually wake up at about 1 a.m. and go out to urinate. When he returned, he would often sit for half an hour or an hour before going back to sleep again. Then, sometimes between 3 and 4 a.m., he would wake up and go to the kitchen to cut vegetables. These nighttime toilets trips became something of a ritual for both Bhagwan and the attendants. When he woke up, the attendant had to take Bhagwan's kamandalu, fill it with hot water and give it to him. The water was heated on a Kumuti charcoal brazier, which was always kept by the side of Bhagwan's couch. The attendant then had to give Bhagwan his stick and his torch, hold the door open for him and follow him out. In the night, Bhagwan usually went to a place where Muruganar's Samadhi, grave and shrine is now located because we had no proper toilet in those days. When he returned, the attendant had to clean Bhagwan's feet with a cloth. Bhagwan would never wake his attendants up. It was their duty to be awake and ready at 1 a.m. One morning I failed to wake up because I had had a dream in which I woke up at 1 a.m. and performed all the duties I have just described. At the end of my dream, I went back to sleep satisfied that I had done my work. I was woken up sometime later by Bhagwan returning alone to the hill. I apologized for oversleeping and told Bhagwan that I had dreamed about doing all the usual services for him and had then gone back to sleep. Bhagwan laughed and said, "The services you did for the dream, Swami, are for me only." When I first came to the ashram, there were still some leopards in the area. They rarely came into the ashram, but at night they often frequented the place where Bhagwan used to urinate. I remember him meeting one on one of his nocturnal trips. He was not the least bit afraid. He just looked at the leopard and said, "Poda, go away," and the leopard just walked away. Soon after I came, I was given a name by Bhagwan. My original name had been Sela Perumal. One day, Bhagwan casually mentioned that I reminded him of a man called Annamalai Swami who had been his attendant at Sakanda Ashram. He started to use this name as a nickname for me. When the devotees heard this, they all followed suit, and within a few days my name New identity was firmly established. Bhagwan lived at Sakandashram on the eastern slopes of the Arunachala from 1916 to 1922. Annamalai Swami died there during a plague outbreak in 1922. When I had been an attendant for about 2 weeks, the collector from Vellore, the senior most civil servant from the local district headquarters, came to have Bhagwan's darshan. He was called Ranganathan and he brought a large plate of sweets as an offering to Bhagwan. Bhagwan asked me to distribute the sweets to everyone in the ashram, including those who were not then present in the hall. While I was distributing the sweets to the people outside the hall, I went to a place where no one could see me and secretly helped myself to about double the quantity that I was serving to everyone else. When the distribution was completed, I went back to the hall and put the plate underneath Bhagwan's sofa. Bhagwan looked at me and said, "Did you take choice as much as everyone else?" I was shocked because I was sure that no one had seen me do it. I took it when no one was looking. How does Bhagwan know? Bhagwan made no answer. This incident made me realize that it is impossible to hide anything from Bhagwan. From that time on, I automatically assumed that Bhagwan always knew what I was doing. This new knowledge made me more alert and more attentive to my work because I did not want to commit any similar mistake again. It was also the attendant's job to protect Bhagwan from eccentric or misguided devotees. I remember one incident of this kind very clearly. A boy about 20 years of age appeared in the hall wearing only a loin cloth. After announcing to everyone that he also was Jnani, he went and sat on the sofa next to Bhagwan. Bhagwan made no comment about this, but very soon afterwards he got up and went out of the hall. While he was away, I took the opportunity to eject this impostor. All of us in the hall were annoyed by his arrogance and his presumption, and I must admit that I handled him rather roughly while I was throwing him out. I also forbade him from coming into the hall again. When peace had been finally restored, Bhagwan came back into the hall and resumed his usual position on the sofa. I was very happy to have found such a great guru as Bhagwan. As soon as I saw him, I felt that I was looking at God Himself. However, initially I was not very impressed either by the ashram or by the devotees who had gathered around him. The management seemed to be very autocratic, and most of the devotees did not seem to have much interest in the spiritual life. So far as I could see, they were primarily interested in gossiping. These early impressions disturbed me. I thought to myself, Bhagwan is very great, but if I live in the company of these people, I may lose the devotion that I already have. I came to the conclusion that it would not be spiritually beneficial for me to associate with people who did not seem to have much devotion. I now know that this was a very arrogant attitude, but those who were very true feelings at the time. These thoughts disturbed me so much that for 3 or 4 nights I was unable to sleep. I finally came to the conclusion that I would keep Bhagwan as my guru but live somewhere else. I remember thinking I will go and do meditation on the self somewhere else without having the distracting friendship of any human beings. I will go to any unknown place and meditate on God. I will go for Viksha beg for food and lead a solitary life. About 3 weeks after I first came to the ashram, I left to take up my new life. I told no one, not even Bhagwan, about my decision. I left at 1 a.m. on a full moon night and started to walk towards town. I went straight through the town, past Ishanya Math, a monastic institution on the northeast side of the Tiruvannamalai and started walking towards Polur. I had no particular destination in mind. I just wanted to get away from the ashram. I spent the whole night walking and reached Polur 20 miles north of Tiruvannamalai just after dawn. The walk had made me very hungry, so I decided to go for Bhiksha in the town. It was not a great success. I begged about 500 different houses, but no one gave me any food. One man told me that I should go back to Tiruvannamalai, while another man who was serving a meal, when I approached him, shouted at me, telling me to go away. Eventually, I gave up and walked to the outskirts of the town. I found a well in a field and spent about half an hour standing in it with the water up to my neck, hoping that the coldness of the water would take my hunger points pains away. It did not work. Then I made my way to the Samadhi shrine of Vithoba and sat there for a while. Vithoba was an eccentric saint rather like Sri Swami who lived in Polur in the first decade of this century. He died a few years before Annamalai Swami went there. I finally got something to eat when an old lady came to do puja. She looked at me and said, "It seems as if you are very hungry. Your eyes are starting to sink into your face. I don't have much myself, but I can give you some ragi, millet, gruel." As she was saying this, she gave me about 1.5 tumblers of the ragi gruel to drink. It did not do much for my hunger pangs, but I was still very happy to receive it. The long walk and the lack of food had made me very tired. As I sat there, I began to question the wisdom of living Bhagwan. It was clear that things had not turned out in the way that I had expected. This indicated to me that the decision might not have been correct. I formulated a plan that I thought would test whether my decision had been correct or not. I took a large handful of flowers, placed them on the samadhi of Vithoba, and started to remove them two at a time. I had decided in advance that if there were an odd number of flowers, I would return to Bhagwan. If there were an even number, I would carry on with my original plan. When the result indicated that I should go back to Bhagwan, I immediately accepted the decision and started walking towards Tiruvannamalai. Once I had accepted that my prarabdha destiny was to stay with Bhagwan, my luck began to change. As I was walking into town, a hotel owner invited me into his hotel and gave me a free meal and some money. He even He even prostrated to me. I had decided to return to Tiruvannamalai by train because I wanted to get back to Bhagwan as soon as possible. But before I could reach the station, some more people invited me into their house and asked me to eat. I ate a little food there and then excused myself on the ground that I had just eaten a big meal. I had decided to try to travel without a ticket, wrongly assuming that the money I had been given would not be enough for the journey. My good luck continued on the train. Halfway to Tiruvannamalai, a ticket inspector came to inspect all the tickets. I seemed to be invisible to him, for I was the only person in the carriage who was not asked to produce a ticket. A similar thing happened at the end of the journey when I paused in front of the ticket collector on the station platform. He said, "You have already given your ticket, go, you are holding the others up." Thus, by Bhagwan's grace, I escaped on both occasions. I walked the remaining distance to the ashram. On my arrival, I went straight to Bhagwan, prostrated before him, and told him everything that had happened. Bhagwan then confirmed that it was my destiny to stay at Ramanasramam. Looking at me, he said, "You have work to do here. If you try to live without doing the job that are destined for you, where can you go?" After saying this, Bhagwan looked at me intently for a period of about 15 minutes. As he was looking at me, I heard a verse repeating itself inside me. It was so loud and clear it felt as if someone had implanted a radio there. I had not come across this verse before. I only discovered later that it was one of the verses from Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, one of Bhagwan's philosophical poems which deals with the nature of reality. The verse says, "The supreme state which is praised and which is attained here in this life by clear self-enquiry, which rises in the heart when association with a sadhu is gained, is impossible to attain by listening to preachers, by studying and learning the meaning of the scriptures, by virtuous deeds or by any other means." Although the word sadhu generally refers to someone who is pursuing a spiritual career full time. In this context, it means someone who has realized the self. The meaning was very clear. Staying near Bhagwan would be more beneficial for me than doing sadhana alone in some other place. At the end of the 15 minutes, I didn't namas, namaskarmam Namaskaram to Bhagwan and said, "I will do whatever work you order me to do. But please also give me moksha, liberation. I do not want to become a slave to Maya." Illusion. Bhagwan made no reply, but I was not perturbed by his silence. Somehow the mere asking of the question had made my mind peaceful. Bhagwan then asked me to go and eat some food. I replied that I was not hungry because I had recently eaten. I added, "I don't want food, all I want is moksha, freedom from sorrow." This time Bhagwan looked at me, nodded and said, "Yes, yes." This verse from Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham on the greatness of association with self-realized being is one of five on the subject, while Bhagwan incorporated in the poem. He discovered the original Sanskrit verses on a piece of paper which had been used to wrap some sweets. He liked the ideas they conveyed so much he translated them into Tamil himself and put them at the beginning of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham. The other four verses are as follows. By satsang, association with reality, or more commonly with realized being, the association with the objects of the world will be removed. When that worldly association is removed, the attachments or tendencies of the mind will be destroyed. Those who are devoid of mental attachment will perish in that which is motionless. Thus they attain Jivan Mukti, liberation while still alive in the body. Cherish their association. If one if one gains association with sadhus, of what use are all the religious observances when the excellent cool southern breeze itself is blowing? What is the use of holding a hand fan? Heat will be removed by the cool moon, poverty by the celestial wish, fulfilling trees and sin by the Ganges, but know that all these beginnings with the heat will be removed merely by having the darshan sight of incomparable sadhus, sacred bathing places which are composed of water and images of deities which are made of stone and earth cannot be comparable to those great souls, Mahatmas. What a wonder! The bathing places and deities bestow purity of mind after countless days, where such purity is instantly bestowed upon people as soon as sadhus see them with their eyes. Several years after this incident, Annamalai Swami asked Bhagwan about one of these verses. We know where the moon is and we know where the Ganga is, but where is this fulfilling tree? If I tell you where it is, replied Bhagwan, will you be able to leave it? I was puzzled by this peculiar answer, but I did not pursue the matter. A few minutes later, I opened a copy of Yoga Vasishtha, which was lying next to Bhagwan. On the first page I looked at, I found a verse which said, "The Jnani is the wish fulfilling tree." I immediately understood Bhagwan's strange answer to my question. Before I had a chance to tell Bhagwan about this, he looked at me and smiled. He seemed to know that I had found the right answer. I told Bhagwan about the verse, but he made no comment. He just carried on smiling at me. So the video ends here. Thank you, my dear friends, for watching this video. Please like, comment, and share the video and subscribe the channel. Namaskar, my dear friends. Namaskar, namaskar, namaskar.